When the digging ended, the total was 27 murdered.
William Reese is the only suspect in the murders of Jessica Kane, Laura Smither, Kellyanne Cox, and Tiffany Johnston.
They got me set up like I'm a serial killer right now.
Tata is charged with 4 counts of manslaughter for this February 24th fire that killed 4 children. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the season finale of The Evidence Room. Today, we're focusing on serial killer William Lewis Reese. Reese spent several years in an Oklahoma prison for rape. When he was released, he came to Texas and went on a killing spree in 1997, killing 4 young ladies and kidnapping another woman.
It sounds bad because they got me set up like I'm a serial killer right now. All right?
Are you?
No, I'm not. I'll pass any polygraph you throw at me.
Joining me today is Galveston County District Attorney Jack Rohde. Thank you for coming in.
Yes, sir.
So let's start. My recollection is I was a baby reporter in 1997 when Laura Smither disappeared from her Friendswood home. Let's start there. So that was the first murder that Reese was believed to have committed, correct?
Correct, that's correct. And he was developed as a suspect within just a matter of days after her disappearance. And Friendswood, in fact, the entire community really turned out searching for her in those days that followed. And the Friendswood Police Department was just rabid in terms of their investigation and following up and interviewing the witnesses.
I remember one of the frightening things is Laura was homeschooled, and she went for a jog just a quarter of a mile from her home and just disappeared.
Right.
She was found, our memory serves, in a retention pond near Pasadena a few weeks later.
I know that I could not have made it through those 3 weeks without the sort of support that was shown to us. I could not have done it.
Bob and Gay Smither talked today of gratitude. Friends and strangers searched for their 12-year-old daughter, Laura, from her abduction on April 3rd to her discovery in a Pasadena retention pond 17 days later. They talked also of the $50,000 reward that remains unclaimed for a murder that remains unsolved.
How did investigators link Reese at that time?
Well, Reese at the time was employed at a construction site right near where Laura had been abducted from or disappeared from. And so through canvassing witnesses and conducting interviews, Friendswood Police Department identified him as a person. And then in investigating his history, knew that he was a sex offender from Oklahoma who had been in prison for sexual assault and then had been released.
Let me ask you this, and maybe you can give me an explanation, because I'm having a damn hard time trying to, okay? We have a witness that saw this girl jogging toward Diamond B right about 9 o'clock.
Well, I ain't seen nobody.
And I want to know why, if she was jogging, why you didn't see her.
Well, I didn't see her.
Did you agree you left about 9 o'clock, give or take a couple minutes?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Okay, and this about the time this guy saw her.
Well, I never did see her.
Could you have seen her and just not paid any attention?
I don't know. I mean, when I get my vehicle, I pay attention to what's in front of me. That's it. And I go. That's all I do.
Let me tell you what's in store for the rest of the night here, okay? Just so you understand. And like we've been talking about, we want to eliminate you, okay? We want to get you in here and do what we need to do with you. And that's talk with you. Want to get a blood sample. The last thing we need you to do is give us a written statement.
A written statement?
Yeah, about what we've talked about what you were doing on Wednesday night and what you did Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay? About you coming to work, 7:30, what you did. Just write it out in your own handwriting, okay?
That's a little hard to do.
Well, the best you can, okay?
Did you kill Laura Smither?
No, I didn't. I didn't kill her, never seen the girl, never met the girl. I've never been with the girl. I mean, I don't know how many times I have to keep telling people this. I did not do it.
For those who weren't around at that time, this was particularly frightening because even though it was like great, Reese was developed as this suspect within a matter of days, he wasn't charged at that time. What was the difficulty?
He was not, and it was not due to any inactivity by law enforcement for sure. Although he was identified as a suspect, there were a number of other suspects as well. And just the sheer matter of being able to have physical evidence that could somehow connect him to that abduction. In addition to the fact that when Reese was interviewed, he claimed zero knowledge of Laura or any involvement with her disappearance.
Now, that's amazing because I remember them sending floor mats off to try and match fibers found on Laura's socks to floor mats in his truck. But he was questioned. He knew he was a suspect.
I understand I'm an ex-con, but you got to understand me. Look, when a person goes to prison, he first gets out. It's hard. It's hard out here. And if anything goes wrong anywhere, who are they going to look at first? An ex-con.
The next awful shoe to drop came in August of '97 when Jessica Kane disappeared.
Right.
That case was another one because, again, she was never found at that time.
Right.
And I would like to say to whoever does have Jessica, please let her go. Please bring her home. We miss her and we love her.
Those were the words that rang out across Galveston County on this fourth day of the search for Jessica Kane. Some might concern themselves with logistics. Others might take on the work of hacking through rough terrain. But the toughest job of all was one everybody shared, holding emotions in check.
Please don't forget my daughter. Remember her in her prayers. That's what's holding us up, and we appreciate your prayers. Please don't stop. Help us bring her home.
When Jessica disappeared, she disappeared without a trace, and there was no recovery of her body. And so I think at the time, people were making a connection, obviously, but there had not been enough evidence to identify Reese as someone who could be charged.
Was he looked at in Jessica again?
He was always considered a suspect, but with Jessica's disappearance, because there was, it was a bit removed and the circumstances were so different. Her vehicle found on the side of the road with no apparent violence or accident or anything like that. A number of other suspects were developed, and just over the course of the years that followed, all of the agencies that were involved, whenever a new suspect name came up, they would run that down. They would get tips in on phone calls and follow up on those, travel all over the place, interviewing witnesses who claimed to have some information, trying to figure out who could have been responsible for Jessica, and was it the same person who was responsible for Laura.
I remember it wouldn't really be until about 2016 that we knew the full breadth of what William Reese had done in the pain and in the trauma that he had caused.
This one seen her in a ditch. I didn't know what to do. I said, she's got out of prison, and I thought, man, they ain't gonna believe me. So I picked her up, and her head was rolled around backwards. And I put her in the floorboard of my truck on the passenger side, and I shut the door, and I had this little blanket, and I laid it on her. I took off. I don't remember how I got out where I was, some detention pond. I laid her in the water, and I went home. She was yelling at me. And I lost it. I just got up and walked over there and hit her. Right there on the interstate. Cars were going by and everything.
No one stopped or anything, just kept going?
No one stopped.
Okay.
I remember distinctly during that period of '97, it was terrifying. I mean, you had these massive searches for these young girls who just disappeared. I know Laura was found, Jessica wasn't for a very, very long time. But then we find out none of that stopped him. He kept doing what he was doing. What does that say to you when somebody knows they're a suspect, they know police are looking at them, they've literally had things done to test pieces of evidence that could link him, and he still kept going?
It's a complete lack of remorse. It is depravity and evil is what it is.
So what later came out you have Laura in April of 97. Then as far as the public knew, you had Jessica Kane in August of 97. But in between that, you had the murder of Tiffany Johnston in Bethany, Oklahoma.
Next thing I know, this girl was yelling at me that I sprayed her. I don't think I sprayed her, but she was cussing me and everything. And we started getting into the verbal words back and forth. And I lost it. There wasn't going to be too many of what she was calling me, and I hit her.
You hit her with?
With my hand.
Okay.
And I grabbed her, and she hit me in the back of the head. I had a bunch of horseshoes in there, in boxes. They put shoes on horses. She hit me with one of them, man. That's when I grabbed her around the throat and started choking her.
While you was inside the horse trailer?
Right, when I was inside the horse trailer. And then she wasn't moving no more, and I shut the door and I backed out.
And the abduction of Kellyanne Cox in Denton. And Kelly wasn't found either.
Correct.
Opened up my door and boom, I run right into her and the coke went all over me. And she said something, and we got into it there, and she hit me with that coke. It was just a plastic bottle, and it was on. When I hit her, she hit her head. You know how your door opens up? Mm-hmm. Her head hit there, and she slid back. She was out. I put her in the back seat. She never woke up. She wasn't breathing or nothing. She never woke up.
Had law enforcement put all of these together at that point?
You know, they were starting to make connections because as soon as Reese had been identified as a suspect by Friendswood, they began pulling, and this is back in 1997, pulling all the information they could. And they had found a number of credit card gas receipts that started to place Reese along the I-45 corridor between South Houston and Friendswood and Galveston County, going up through Dallas and Denton and into Oklahoma. So he was a strong suspect, but because it was so long ago and the lack of any physical evidence that could connect him, there was just nothing that was ever sufficient so that a DA's office could actually charge Reese in any of those offenses.
That's got to be incredibly frustrating from a law enforcement standpoint, to have fairly strong indications that this is our guy.
I can't imagine how frustrating it was.
Okay. So Reese came back into the picture as far as the public is concerned towards the tail end of 1997, when it turned out that right after Laura, he tried, or not tried, but he did. He kidnapped Sandra Sapal from Webster.
Webster 911. Yes, ma'am. Y'all need to come to Waffle House. Somebody just came in and said that someone was abducted and they jumped out of the car and they're bleeding.
So in late 97, he kidnapped Sandra Sapal in the Webster area. And as he's driving up I-45, such an incredibly brave woman, she jumps out of his moving truck on the freeway and survives that and goes to police. And based on her brave testimony and her accurate memory, they're able to eventually identify Reese as the one who kidnapped her.
I want you to repeat after me in a loud, clear voice. Do not scream. Do not scream. In a loud voice, get in the truck. Get in the truck. In a loud voice, I will kill you. I will kill you.
He was arrested not long thereafter, and then by the time of his arrest, of course, that's when the murder stopped.
Right, and because I remember at the time when he was getting ready to go to trial, he had been charged, he was getting ready to go to trial, then it started coming out that, hey, he's been looked at in Laura's case, but it was kind of tangential to Jessica, but it wasn't as direct as it was to Laura Smithers' case. But I remember, going back to Sandra's case, I remember listening to the 911 call, which is still in the Harris County Archive, at a Waffle House, and they're like, my God, this poor woman is covered in blood. She's just walked into the Waffle House because she's literally jumped out of a speeding truck going down I-45. I can't imagine the courage that it would take to do that.
Female jumped out of a white dually. Unknown LP, last seen headed 45 northbound. She needs an ambulance. She can't walk. Okay, we've got an ambulance coming.
She asked him to help her change a front flat tire. He then persuaded her with a knife to get inside his truck, and then they proceeded northbound on 45, and she jumped out 1 mile north of El Dorado out of the moving truck.
And I've only briefly spoken to Sandra over the years because she's never really wanted to publicly talk about this. But yes, in hindsight, if you feel differently, say so, she stopped these killings. I firmly believe more young girls would be dead had Sandra not jumped from that pickup truck.
I would agree with that. It was her bravery to survive the kidnapping and what would certainly have been her murder that followed, and then her willingness to not only survive, but to come forward with her testimony and see that case through so that she testified at trial and he was convicted and sentenced to 60 years in prison.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have more on William Lewis Reese.
They've talked about having a list of suspects in Friendswood. Why have you moved to the top of that list? Why is it not somebody else if you're innocent as you claim?
Right. Easy target.
Her name, Jessica Kane, her face etched into the city's collective memory for nearly 20 years.
Please don't forget my daughter.
But Kane wasn't the only young woman to disappear under mysterious circumstances in the spring and summer of '97. April 3rd, 1997, 12-year-old Laura Smither was abducted while jogging near her house. Her body was found 2 weeks later. Then May, 19-year-old Sandra Sapal was kidnapped at knife point from a gas station in Webster. She survived. July 15th, Kelly Ann Cox vanished. The University of North Texas student was last seen at a gas station in Denton.
My last words to Kelly were, "I love you, honey. Have a good day. I'll talk to you this afternoon."
July 26th, 19-year-old Tiffany Johnston disappeared from a car wash near Oklahoma City. Her body was found in a field. And August 17th, Jessica Kane. 5 young women whose fates are connected by time and this man, William Reese. He is the main suspect in each of these cases.
His pattern seemed to be orchestrating an encounter near a vehicle that led to his ability to get close enough to grab him. And the problem, one of the problems, was that the only way we know what happened in those murders is what Reese would admit to.
What they think is that there's more to it than just you guys arguing.
What else is
there? There was
there?
sex involved.
I was getting plenty of sex.
I understand that, but sometimes that's not enough. And sometimes, like I said, me personally, I think something triggers you.
With Kelly Cox, he would never say anything more than they had some altercation in Denton in the parking lot of that store where she spilled a drink on him and they got words, and then he either shoved her or had some contact with her, and she just died.
And she never woke up.
Yeah, where did you go from there?
Come back to Houston.
And she was stayed in the back
The whole
the whole
time.
time?
Because I was trying to figure out what the hell am I doing, man? This everything keeps going downhill. Keeps going downhill. And I drove out there and off of 288 and stayed out there all night. Trying to figure out what the hell am I going to do, man? What am I doing? Things keep getting worse and worse. I had a dozer out there and I dug me a little old hole and put her in it.
With Jessica, ultimately Reese's confession is that they had this altercation, this verbal altercation, and then followed one another down the road towards Tiki Island. And at some point, and his stories would vary, but at some point Jessica pulled off on the side of the road and he approached her and they got into an argument and he shoved her, punched her, whatever, and she just fell dead immediately.
I keep thinking I put my hands around her throat and started choking her, but I can't remember.
Okay.
And then I know she was out help out. I just picked her up and put her in the Jeep, put the seatbelt on her, shut the door, walked around, got in my Jeep, and took off.
What about Laura, though? Laura was just jogging near her home.
And his statement about Laura is that ultimately, when he would finally admit to being there and seeing Laura, was that he was driving and got distracted and looked up and he had hit Laura as she was jogging along the side of the road, claiming that the mirror on his truck had hit her, and then he looks over and finds her in the ditch. And she's dying, or if not shortly thereafter, dead.
And when I got out of the truck, there was a little girl down in the ditch, and she was crying and yelling. So I go down in the ditch, I'm panicking, and I was trying to get her to quit screaming. And I put my hand over her mouth, and she was facing away from me, so when I turned her head around, I felt her neck pop, and she got real quiet. And I picked her up, I put her in the truck because I was panicking. I didn't know what to do. And I took her out to this detention pond. She was already dead, and I took her clothes off and put her in the water.
The way that Reese, when he ultimately did admit to committing these murders, constructed his testimony was so careful that he would never admit to really anything more than actually committing the murder, and even that was close. But there was never any indication that he kidnapped them while they were still alive. Never any indication of an admission that he committed any kind of sexual offense against them or anything like that.
Did you try to have sex with any victims?
I don't think so.
Okay. I guess I don't think so. It kind of opens up some doors.
Well, I mean, as far as I know, no.
Okay.
It was just, I was aggravated.
Right, right.
Because I don't remember having, because if I did, I might as well tell you, hey, yeah, I did. You know, there's no sense into it.
With the passage of time, for each of his 3 victims in Texas, there was no way to go back and otherwise prove that any of that had happened. We had no witnesses who could identify a kidnapping while the victim was still alive. There was no forensic evidence that could prove whether there had been a sexual assault before death. And so we were left only with Reese's carefully crafted confession.
That weird thing, you know.
Right, intermittent wipers.
Yeah, whatever it is. I couldn't get it to work, and I was paying attention to it, and my mirror slammed up against the passenger side door, and it scared me. And I thought I hit a mailbox. Really is what I thought I hit. So I stopped, and I got out, and that's when I heard her in the ditch. And she was kind of setting up, and when I got down in the ditch, I tried and tell her to calm down and stuff. She wouldn't calm down, so when I put my hand over her, I just reached out and grabbed a hold of her like that. When I turned her head, I think I went too fast. And I felt it, you know, in my hand, back of her neck where it popped.
Okay, so basically you broke her neck.
Yes, sir.
What finally broke? Because I remember when Reese finally came back, essentially, was 2016.
Right. Meanwhile, while all of these meetings were happening, Friendswood PD had been continually working to examine trace evidence that had been recovered from Reese's vehicle, and that trace evidence involved everything from fibers collected from floor mats to fibers collected from horse blankets and fibers collected from Laura's socks and hair to try and make a connection. But one of the problems with fiber evidence and hair evidence is it's not like DNA. It's not uniquely identifiable, right? So so we were able to identify consistencies that didn't rule Reese out, but nothing as strong as DNA that would actually connect him. But they continued their work, and at that point they had gotten in touch with Oklahoma, and certainly Kelly Cox, who'd been abducted out of Denton and disappeared out of Denton, was on the radar too. So all of these agencies were sharing information.
They figured, well, if you've done it once, you must have done it again.
For the last 18 years, Reese has remained silent. But in August of 2015, detectives near Oklahoma City working the Tiffany Johnston cold case got a DNA hit. Now, there was solid evidence.
By 2015, DNA technology had developed enough that Oklahoma was actually able to develop a profile from the genetic evidence that was recovered from Tiffany Johnston's body.
And she was at a car wash. This is like these other ones. She was just at a car wash and
literally minding her own business at a car wash when Reese showed up. And so Oklahoma was able to identify Reese as the suspect who had left DNA at the scene.
She wasn't moving no more, and I shut the door and I backed out and went down, I don't know what road that was, I pulled her out and laid her in some tall grass and took off.
And so with that information in hand, Friendswood Police, the Texas Rangers, the FBI, the Sheriff's Office here in Galveston County, and the other agencies involved met and said, well, this is enough information that we can make a run at Reese.
And why are you telling me these things today, Bill?
Because I want closure for the family to know the truth, what really did happen, and that I'm sorry about it. I wish I could have done something different, but I just got out of prison and I think no one would believe me, and I panicked. I shouldn't have panicked.
Why did he finally start talking?
You know, why Reese finally decided to start giving information, I don't know, right? Because you don't know what goes on in the mind of somebody like that who could commit those crimes in the first place. He knew he was charged in Oklahoma. He knew he might be facing the death penalty in Oklahoma. I don't know if Reese ever had remorse. I don't know if this was more a way by which Reese could still kind of exercise some control over providing information. Who knows what prompted him to finally start sharing some information.
Facing a murder charge and possible death penalty, sources say Reese started talking, revealing details about the disappearance of Kane and Cox. Reese led them to this field, even walking the site in handcuffs to help crews narrow the search.
I'm so glad that if Mr. Reese is speaking, that he's telling the truth at this time.
We realized that for us to be able to get any information that would help us actually find where Jessica Kane was, where Kelly Cox was from Denton, we needed Reese to give us something, because for almost 20 years, they were just disappeared in thin air. So the Denton County DA spoke to Kelly Cox's family. I spoke to the family of both Laura Smither and Jessica Kane. And we reached an agreement that if Reese were willing to lead us to Jessica's body and provide truthful information about their murder, then we would not seek the death penalty against him for that murder. And Denton County made a similar promise in exchange for Reese providing information on where Kelly Cox could be found and what he had done to her.
He tried to basically give a visual description, and then eventually he himself had to go out there.
Well, the order of events was Reese was willing to give us the location of one of his victims first. And so he actually intended to give us the victim of Kelly Cox down in Brazoria County. And so we were able to, through a bench warrant, remove Reese from the prison unit and bring him out to the scene in Brazoria County, where he said that he had buried Kelly Cox. And they dug at that location for several days to no avail. And eventually the rain had set in such that the excavation couldn't be done. And because they were using heavy equipment, backhoes, bulldozers to just meticulously scrape dirt off in the volume of inches at a time, looking for remains.
Because you have to be careful you don't destroy evidence.
Right. You've really, and the operators of this heavy equipment were just amazing at the precision that they could win. And these were people from the Parks Department and Road and Bridge of the county. Reese began to get frustrated because they couldn't find Kelly Cox's remains, and he started, I suppose as his personality would be, to fear that people weren't taking him seriously. So he offered then to lead us to where he had buried Jessica up in South Houston. And so... Okay, but then you found Kelly after Jessica, right? Because you went back out to Brazoria, because I remember when you found Jessica. The search for Jessica took 3 weeks.
19 years after her disappearance, family and friends of Jessica Kane finally have their answer. Harris County confirmed Friday remains found in a southeast Houston field are Kane's.
I was there the day she disappeared on the original search.
Tim Miller with Texas EquiSearch also assisted in the recent search for Jessica's remains. He says this is not the news her family wanted to hear, but not knowing is usually worse.
They now have the opportunity to go through that grieving process and realize that, Jessica's not coming back.
To see the way that these law enforcement agencies who had been working together since 1997 were all present at that scene, Texas EquiSearch was out there with volunteers. The Lighthouse Charity Cooking Team was out there every day feeding everyone. And on this tract of land, they searched every day, scraping inches of dirt at a time, and they couldn't find Jessica's remains. The amazing thing about that was it was really the last day or two because we were out of land. We were at the back right corner of that tract of land, and there was maybe a day or two left to search. And it was in that, and Reese had become very frustrated too because he had remembered burying her at a different location. And he would provide information and we would search in that area. We ended up tearing down the gentleman's barn that owned on that property with his consent, but to try and look under there. And it was on the last day, really, in the back right corner of that property that they found her.
He was a construction worker. Is that how he was able to bury these bodies? He had access to big equipment?
So Reese had also stolen heavy equipment, and the locations where he buried Kelly and where he buried Jessica, he already had stolen backhoes and bulldozers there.
Oh, so he stole this equipment for the purpose of burying these girls?
Well, we never know that, but we do know that it was awfully convenient that he had places in remote areas where he could take a body and then use heavy equipment to bury them.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have more on the cases against William Lewis Reese.
I'm sure it's going to be asking me, but on the Kelly case, you took her because you had a dozer somewhere and you knew that you would be able to bury her, right?
Yes,
on
sir.
the Denton case.
Yes, sir.
The same thing on the Kane case.
Yes, sir.
That you knew that there was a dozer that you could bury the body.
Yes, sir.
How come you didn't do that with the Laura Smither case? Did you have another location you could have gone to where a dozer was?
I didn't have no dozers then.
Oh, you didn't have any?
I didn't have no dozers.
Oh, so you could have stealing the dozers after that.
Yeah, I was drinking and well, everything just went downhill.
So he finds the two young ladies, and then I remember that's when, not long after, you secured the indictments to him. Was that also based on his confessions?
Sure. And, you know, a lot of folks have asked, and rightly so, why Reese wasn't charged with capital murder like he was in Oklahoma. And that goes back to the way that Reese provided information. Oklahoma was able to charge him with a capital offense, a death penalty eligible offense, because they had evidence not only of the murder, but of the sexual assault. The way Reese provided information to law enforcement in Texas on his Texas cases was so carefully crafted that he only gave enough information that he could be connected to the murder. And there was, and because of the time that passed from finding the victims, either with Laura a number of weeks or 19 years for Kelly and Jessica, there was no way to prove that there had been anything else. There were no witnesses who could say there was a kidnapping. There were no cell phones or no video, anything like that. So after we were able to find Kelly and Jessica, and we were able to indict him in Galveston County on murder, and then Brazoria County indicted him as well. At that point, Oklahoma was free to come get him. And this was the agreement that we had, and they extradited him to Oklahoma and tried him on Tiffany Johnson's murder.
So he goes to Oklahoma, and I remember one of the interesting things on the trial is Oklahoma is a little bit different than Texas in the way the law works, in that they brought out all the evidence of all the girls during Tiffany's murder. Down here, you've got to focus on the one crime at a time during trial, but up there, it all came in to evidence.
And that is one of the differences and can be one of the difficulties in Texas and most other states, is that when someone is on trial for committing an offense, the state is only able to present evidence of that particular offense. And generally speaking, it doesn't matter that this person had committed 5 other similar offenses. That evidence is usually not going to come in. So a jury won't have the benefit of knowing that until he's found guilty and they can consider it in the punishment stage.
There's an old saying in the law, justice delayed is justice denied. Justice will not be delayed any longer in this case. I sentence you to death.
I'm just so thankful that he will not ever be out on the streets again. I mean, ever.
Today was the first time Cox's mother, Jan Bynum, saw Reese in person. When Cox disappeared, she had a 19-month-old daughter. Alexis is now an adult.
Disgusting. He's disgusting.
That's a good word. I'm not.
I mean, you could feel the evil enter the room and leave it when he was coming in and out.
And so he's got a death penalty in Oklahoma.
Right.
How did it work out that he came back again?
So at that point, Reese had 3 pending indictments. He had 2 here in Galveston County and then 1 in Brazoria County. And so those needed to be resolved. And so while he had been convicted and sentenced to death in Oklahoma, he had left Texas in the first place while serving a 60-year sentence as well.
Which he hadn't completed.
For kidnapping. So we can't certainly forget that. So there was still the tie as well. So everyone agreed that he would come back to Texas if he was willing to either accept responsibility on our murders or we would try him here. And ultimately, for whatever reason he decided, he chose to plead guilty to the maximum sentences in those 3 cases.
25 years is an awfully long time to be waiting for justice, and there were a number of years in there where we truly didn't think we'd ever see this day.
And I am just relieved that now the official records will show he was found guilty and convicted of taking my daughter away from us.
Early on, after I became DA in Galveston County, there had been for some time this task force that met periodically, and we've met at Friendswood, we've met at the Sheriff's Office, we've met at the FBI office in Galveston County, where all of these officers, many of them who had been around since before 1997 working on this, would gather and say, okay, what do we have now? What's our latest? Have you heard of any leads? Or do you have any new witnesses? And they would sit in this room and literally put all this information on a board. And then we would just break it down and see what had been done and what hadn't been done and what was missing. And what struck me most is that at that point, it was say 2011, for 14 years, these cases were cold, but yet these officers and rangers and FBI agents wouldn't quit. And although they had this other pressing load of cases that they had to deal with, they still met and just poured over the evidence in these cases to try and figure out what happened to Laura and where Jessica was and what had happened to her. And so they just never quit. They never gave up on investigating it.
What was it like to finally see him in a courtroom pleading guilty to the murders of Laura Smither, Jessica Kane, and Kellyanne Cox?
It was good to see the resolution of that. I have no idea what goes on in the mind of somebody like Reese. I also have no idea the pain that his victims' families went through. I believe that they were able to draw some comfort from him finally accepting responsibility for that as well. And certainly for Kelly's family and Jessica's family, being able to know what had happened to their daughters and having been able to recover their daughters.
I was going to say, how important was it to see him stand before a judge and plead guilty
That
to
was
these murders?
important. His accepting responsibility was important. I hope there was a sense of justice that Reese had accepted responsibility with the assurance that even though we were never able to get enough evidence to be able to seek death on him and execute him in Texas, with the assurance that no matter what happens, Reese will die in prison, either at the hands of the state through execution or through natural causes, sitting in a prison cell just from old age, serving out his sentences. He won't walk free again.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your insights on such a devastating set of cases to our area. I appreciate you being down here.
Yes, sir.
All right. And thank you all for joining us on another episode of The Evidence Room. A few things I do want to point out. We did reach out to several of the family members of Reese's victims. They declined to speak. Reese himself is still in prison in Texas, but he is awaiting extradition to Oklahoma, where he does face the death penalty. You can watch all of the episodes of The Evidence Room on our KPRC 2 Plus app. Thank you for joining us this season.